The big boys, the middle forwards. Who should you be targeting for the run home? Who are the keepers? Welcome back, guys. Longy here, previous overall NRL fantasy champ, currently ranked around 200. Here to bring you my rankings for the middle forward position for 2024. Let's get right into it. Now, first up, really want to hammer home what we're doing here. And if you come from the hooker rankings video, you probably already know this, but we're essentially giving these players scores across a number of different metrics that are allowing us to graph out the players that we can look at for fantasy. So we want to be targeting players in this upper echelon sort of section of fantasy, and we really want to have keepers for the run home rather than any of these sort of mid-range options. So use this as a bit of a system to target players, as well as to look at whether you should hold or sell certain players too. In terms of the positional strength here as well, middle forward, very strong. Hooker, you can see if you came from that video, you'd know it's a bit of a weaker position, but I did hookers just before. Whereas middle forward, we get a lot of options in the top section that we can talk about. So let's get into it here with what this is actually based off. So 5 key stats go into these scores. Consistency of scoring. So how often is that player going above 40 and 50 points? Upside, so how often they're going 60 plus, 70 plus, or 80 plus. The injury risk of that player, the potential they get rested on the run home, and their job security too. So we're factoring all these things in, coming out with the rankings, and the first guy off the list probably shouldn't be a surprise to you. Payne Haas with an 89.8. So number one buy score here. He averages 62.1 when he plays good minutes in the middle. His consistency score is a 95, which is massive. He sits just behind a couple of players. So Connor Watson, Isaiah Yeo, who have those 100 scores. And upside is very high too. So 87 points, sitting behind another couple of players there. Again, Connor Watson, small sample size. And Terrell May actually is an interesting one there too. So with Payne Haas, you get 40 plus 100% of the time. You get 50 plus 90% of the time, 60 plus 40% of the time is actually quite strong as well. 70 plus 30% of the time is really good. And then 80 plus 1 in 10 games, he's going absolutely catastrophic, like massive scores, and you can count him for those. So with Payne Haas, I like the look of it. 830K is a good price. It's pretty straightforward. I think the Broncos for the run home as well, they're fighting for a final spot, and Payne Haas is going to be a guy who gets plenty of minutes, as well as Paddy Carrigan, Reece Walsh, all these other guys, because they're fighting for that chance to play in the finals again after being in the grand final last year. So they've lost 6 in a row. He's going to back up from Origin, I hope. And I think he's a good option to run with here. Next up, Isaiah Yeo. And you can see 89.3 versus 89.8. It's very, very close between these two. You're getting two very different profiles, though. So for Isaiah Yeo, it's a 62.4 average. It's about the same there. You get it a bit cheaper. So 774K, he's priced at a 55 average. So you're getting 7 points of value but when you buy Yeo, which is really cool. Yeo is also being rested this week, which actually helps him a little bit and bumps his score up a bit. Because the fact that he's getting rested this week makes him more interesting for the run home, because he's less likely to get rested in future weeks. So I'm looking at Yeo. I'm pretty happy with that. Buy score here, 89.3, very strong. Consistency score, 100. That's built off the fact that he goes 40 plus, 50 plus, 100% of the time. So never goes below 50 points when he plays 4 minutes. Absolutely crazy from Isaiah Yeo. The upside score, he's number 5 in the middle forward spot. And look, that 67 is okay. That's absolutely fine. But it just reflects the fact that he never goes 80 plus, and he only goes 70 plus about 21% of the time, when compared to Payne Haas, it's about 30% of the time. So just keep that in mind. I will say here too, his total rank is number 2. So Payne Haas, Isaiah Yeo are actually the top 2 players to target when we look at the data from 2024. Out of all positions. So they're the 2 that I'm really going after, as well as this next guy as well. Connor Watson. Now, this one's a bit riskier, but we've only got 4 games of sample size, which means don't go too crazy looking into the data. I think we've seen enough to know that this is legit, by the way. So I'm including him without any reservations. But is he really 100 consistency, 100 upside? Is he really going to score 80 plus 25% of the time, 70 plus 50% of the time? 100% of the time go 50 plus. I don't necessarily think so, but I think the upside there is worth taking a gamble on. So 786K, it's a good price. And you can see that he averages 70.5 when he plays that big minute role at lock. That's 14.5 points of value. So he's priced at, I think it's about a 56 with that price. And you're potentially getting a 70-point guy here. So Connor Watson, he's number 1 in consistency, number 1 in upside. Buy score is number 3, just because I've factored in a few things. So job security, Trent Robinson can make changes. His job security is still quite high, but it's not as high as Isaiah Yeo or Payne Haas. Injury risk, so he has had a few injuries this year. I have factored that in as well. And then the potential for resting, the Roosters are going fantastically well. And if Connor Watson does pick up a niggle, they have so many middle forwards that they might give him a rest too. So factoring all those things in, he comes in as the number 3 buy for me. But if we jump back to the big graph, they're the 3 guys that are seen in that top section. So consistency in particular, they are rock solid in terms of their consistency. Upside is interesting too. We're going to talk about Terrell May, Koloamatangi, Fanua Blake, McInnes, Murray, Pat Carrigan, all these guys as well, and where they sit. But that really is my top 3 options. So if you can only get 3, they're probably the ones to target. The question now becomes, which of your other middle forwards do you hold on to? So we're going to talk about all these different players, Samuel Afinu, Ryan Madison, all those sorts of guys as well. Max Plath, which ones do we hold on to? Which ones do we let go? Next up, number 4, and this might surprise you guys, but Terrell May, he's currently ranked, according to the data, by the way, number 12 overall out of all fantasy players, and he's ranked number 4 out of middle forwards. So, Terrell May is probably one of those first guys that we're picking on our bench if you follow the data. And at 731K, you got a bit of value here. So he's priced at about a 52. You're getting about a 60 average out of Terrell May when he plays 40 plus minutes. Now, that's a pretty low metric. I think I made it 30 plus minutes for Terrell May. So when he's playing decent-ish minutes, you're getting massive scores here. You've got, according to the data here, 40 plus, 79% of the time isn't crazy good. 50 plus, 71% of the time, again, isn't crazy good. But the big thing here is he's going 70 plus 21% of the time. He's going 80 plus 14% of the time. So that's where the upside comes in. That's why his upside score is at a 95, because he's number 2, just behind Watson, by the way. But he's number 2 in upside there, and potentially could be number 1 if you factored in the fact that Watson hasn't played as many games there. So the upside potential of Terrell May is so big that even with a 7th place consistency and with a relatively insecure job security, he's an option that you could look at as a big scorer for the run home. So I'm a big fan of Terrell May. He is at the top of tier 2. And if you want a pod, he's that upside pod you could look at. Next guy here, we got Ruben Cotter, and look, 77.8 buy score, very close. So 78.6, then 77.8. It's all quite close in this section. But he's number 5 here. He averages about 54 when you get him in the starting spot. Consistency is a 73, which is 8th place, so not fantastic. Upside of 49, again, doesn't have those big scores, so you can see on the numbers here, he's only going 50 plus 53% of the time. I'm not super inspired by this one, but I do like the fact that he is locked in for that role. He's quite unlikely to get a rest because the Cowboys are fighting for that top 8 spot, and he has had a few rests through Origin already, is my theory here. And he's relatively durable, so doesn't usually get injured. He's usually a guy you can rely on. He's a guy that you're probably not going to have to trade out. And I factored in here too that a lot of you guys already have Ruben Cotter. So if you're looking at him as a potential sell option, you're not getting that much of an upgrade. So 77.8 is pretty good. Unless you're selling him on for someone crazy good, I wouldn't do it because he is ranked number 15 overall out of all players. So that reliability is worth quite a bit when trades are at a premium. So I like Ruben Cotter. He's the safe option compared to the Terrell May, which is the crazy option. Koloamatangi comes in next, and he's ranked number 16. So all of these guys are guys that you could look at as potential options on your bench. But with Terrell May, buy score is a 77.7. So extremely close. He's within 0.1 of Ruben Cotter. Comes in at number 6 in that metric. His consistency score is a 79. So number 6 there. He's number 4 in terms of upside capability. So has some big scores in him. And you can see that here. He's gone 80 plus 14% of the time when he has played at lock. Now, the risk with Koloamatangi, and the reason why he's not higher on this list, is I don't really buy into the job security for Koloamatangi. So I worry about this with a few of the South players, but I'm looking at Koloamatangi and I think, is he going to stay at lock, and is Cam Murray going to stay on the edge? Now, my view on it is, and you guys play a drinking game when you hear me say this, but Cam Murray, I reckon he's the best lock in the comp. So I can't see why Souths wouldn't be playing him there. I think Koloamatangi is a fantastic edge forward as well. But at the same time, they're both guys who can interchange, so they could stay in these spots. It's just a bit too much risk when you're paying 767K, even though you are paying for this 62.8 average and getting 8 points of value because he's priced at a 55. So I like Koloamatangi a lot as a scorer. I don't like the job security, and I think there's a lot of risk here, especially with South Sydney falling out of the finals, that he will move back to the edge at some point. So keep that in mind. If you have Koloamatangi, stick with him until the wheels fall off. But if you don't have him, I wouldn't be targeting him compared to some of these other players. All right, next up, Paddy Carrigan. And this is a really interesting one. So tale of two stats here. With Paddy Carrigan, you've got a 90 consistency score. So he's top 4 for consistency, whereas the upside score is a 40. So he's number 12 in that spot. So last place out of the group that we're looking at here. But with Paddy Carrigan, you can see that in the stats here, right? So he goes 40 plus 100% of the time, 50 plus 80% of the time, 60 plus half the time as well. That's awesome, but never really goes 70 plus or 80 plus. So that's the thing. You're getting a score between 40 and 70, 93% of the time. So that's something to keep in mind there. Is that enough for you? I don't love the lack of upside. I also think the fact that Payne Haas is back and playing well does drop his score down a little bit too. But at the same time, 759K, not a bad price. If you have Carrigan, you might stick with him for that consistency. If you don't have him, I wouldn't be targeting him compared to some of these other guys. Joey Tarpanay comes in next, and he was a bit of a buy-around sweetheart, right? So Joey Tarpanay, this is purely based on the 2024 numbers. He has good job security and very low injury risk. So 76.9. Again, he's in that same league, 77 to 76.9. All of these players that I'm talking about in tier 2 are within about 1 or 2 points. So they're all very close. It really comes down to your personal preference. But for Joey Tarpanay, it's a 52.6 average this year, playing the big minute middle role. Consistency score is a 72, so 8th place, and very low upside score here as well. So everyone remembers that big buy round 80 plus score that he put up. But in general, he's only going 60 plus 19% of the time. When you compare that to Pat Carrigan at 47% of the time, it's not a massive number. So you're seeing him scoring, under 60 points? So 50s, 40s, 30s, about 81% of the time. It's just not good enough there. So he does drop off a bit. Personally, I'm not a big fan of it. But at the same time, he is consistent. He never gets hurt. So that does bump him up. And if you do buy him, or if you stick with him, you could probably hold him through to the end. And he probably won't get a rest with the way Canberra are playing as well, fighting for a final spot. So it's a safe option. Probably not the option I'd go for the upside, but I don't mind it. Cam McInnes comes in next, and he's 999. So ranked 9th. He's 9th in consistency, and he's 9th in upside. And none of this is a reflection on Cam McInnes himself. It's just the minutes. They fluctuate constantly. We saw that last week and the week before, constantly getting different minutes. 53.6 average is really split into, he's 60 plus when he gets big minutes, and he's like a 40-point guy when he doesn't get those minutes. So I look at him and I think, he's not a full-blown keeper. If you have him, you can stick with him for a bit, but he's probably 10 points behind, maybe even a bit more behind the guys like Payne Haas, Isaiah Yeo, Connor Watson. So I'd probably stick with him. Maybe, they're on a bye this week as well. That's the other hard part. So yeah, I'm probably moving off Cam McInnes actually. Like 50 plus, only 56% of the time. So it's a coin toss whether he goes above or below 50. Not ideal, and he doesn't have those big scores to justify it. So I look at him and then I think about a Terrell May, for example, and I think they're in completely different leagues. Then we got number 10, Mitch Barnett, who I think is the most aggressively overrated fantasy option I've ever seen in my life. I get that the form run recently has been fantastic. He's been on a tear. He's playing Origin, obviously. He's earned that Origin spot. But I look at Barnett and I think, look, it's half the games he goes 50 plus. He's had a couple of big games recently, but 80 plus is only 6% of the time. 70 plus, it's only 13% of the time. Consistency score, he's dead last out of this top 12. And upside score is only 8th. So he's not getting a lot of those big scores. And you're paying 807K, which is premium. It's more than you'd pay for Isaiah Yeo. It's more than you'd pay for Connor Watson, who I think are both way, way, way better options than Mitch Barnett. Dual position's pretty good. And the fact that Tohu Harris is out will mean more minutes for Mitch. But overall, I'm not high on this one at all. Then we got Cam Murray. So Cam Murray comes in here. Look, again, it's based on 2024 data. I've included the data from both lock and edge forward because the scoring is very similar for him this year anyway. So you're getting a 54.9 average when he plays good minutes. Consistency is very high. So 5th place, 88 for consistency. The upside is only in the 10th spot, so quite weak in terms of upside. But I like this a lot because the price he's at, I've got it down there, but the price he's at is 650K. So you're getting a big discount on a guy who has previous years of pedigree, and you're getting a big discount on a guy who goes 40 plus 100% of the time and usually goes 50 plus, has a lot of 60 plus potential, and then hasn't had those big upside games, but has them in him. And we know from previous years that he has them in him, especially if he moves back to the lock spot as well. So for Cam Murray, I like this one. I think the stats underrepresent how good he is. And in terms of discount options, he's 150K cheaper than Barnett. I think he's about the same in terms of fantasy production as Barnett. So the price does come into play here a bit. Murray's a good option in my mind. Then we've got Adam Fanua Blake. He sits at number 12, so he rounds things out. Then we'll talk about the guys who are below that as well after this too. So talk about those hold or sell options. But Fanua Blake, look at the 72.1. It's fine. He's close to these other players too. The big issue is the consistency hasn't been there. And the upside, it was there at the start of the year, but it really has cooled off recently. So that's the issue with Fanua Blake. You need a better upside score to warrant getting someone like him. 683K is a good price. And look, 40 plus, he's going 40 plus 75% of the time. That's pretty good without being great. And then, 50 plus 63%. It's not pretty good. It's actually pretty rubbish. I'm just trying to talk myself into it because I own Fanua Blake right now. But I don't know. I look at previous year's pedigree and I think that these numbers can come up. So 60, 70, 80 plus, especially at the price he's at. So I'm hearing people talk about trading Fanua Blake to Mitch Barnett, for example, and paying, 130K to make that transaction. I wouldn't be doing that. I think Fanua Blake, you could try to stick with him. Would I be targeting him as a buy option? I'm a bit concerned about the resting and job security with the fact that he's leaving the Warriors at the end of the year. So there is a bit of risk there. I know he's ranked number 12 for a reason. He does have that potential to shoot up this list, but the recent form hasn't been great at all. And then we've got these other guys here too. So I've got some of the hold or sell options here. Talk about them. To Max Plath, 65, Curran, 65, Toka Manu, 63. So they all sit in a similar group. They're about 10 points below those keepers, essentially, 10 to 20 points. So look, would I hold on to them? I think Plath is worth holding on to just to see how he plays at hooker this week. Curran, worth holding on to. So this data is based on Max King playing, not playing, whatever happened this year. So Max King being out could boost Curran, but we don't have a data set to work off there. And then Toka Manu, he's getting cheap. You could make a case to hold on to him, but I think he's probably a pretty firm sell. They've got players coming back too, so Twile's back as well. Sorensen is a 60 here. Again, dual position, so he's pretty cheap. If you want to hold on to him, I don't mind it, but he's not a full-blown keeper. Eisenhuth is definitely not a keeper and not a buy this week, so I'd be selling Eisenhuth pretty happily. Jack DeBellin, I'm definitely selling him as well. 58.8 isn't good enough, and he's on the buy this week too. Sammy Finu, Morgan Smithies, we've got Maddo, so Ryan Madison, Nathan Brown, Tafao Sipley, all those guys sitting quite low here. Look, Finu, you could make a case for him being dual position and his form increasing as the year goes on because he's a rookie. But I think overall, these guys aren't keepers. So you could make a case for selling any of these guys. The issue is that some of them are quite cheap. So Brown and Sipley, for example, they're still making money. So no rush to sell these guys, but they're definitely not keepers. Anyway, that is a summary of the middle forwards. So my summary here is I reckon you target Connor Watson, Payne Haas, Isaiah Yeo as your top priorities. And you want to make some definitive calls here. So I'm going to go through a few options here. You could take Paddy Carrigan for the safety in the Broncos finals push. He's not as good with Haas, though, so I don't like that one as much. You could take Cam Murray for the historical pedigree and the consistency. I actually like this option a lot. He's quite a bit cheaper than a lot of these options too. You could take Kaloma Matangi if you think he's going to stay at lock. He can actually be in this top section if he stays at lock, but the job security is very dicey, so that's up to you. And then Terrell May you can take as well. If he gets the minutes, he gets the points. He can also live in this up section if he gets those consistent minutes. But is Robbo going to give them to him? Jared Hargraves is out for another 3 weeks, so maybe not. We'll see. And you've got other players like Fanua Blake, Barnett, Tarpanay, Cotter, McInnes, who are all in that section where you can hold on to them. They can be on your bench. They're not ideal, but they're good options. And everything below that, so Toka Manu and Plath at the top of that section. And then we go down here and we've got, all these guys that you probably want to be moving on at some point pretty soon. So the only other case I would make here is if Ryan Madison goes back to that 80-minute role and he stays in that spot, or, if you want to keep Finu or Sorensen or any of these players here, Curran, and they're not in your 17, but they're that edge of your bench backup guy, the dual position is really valuable. And a lot of these guys do have dual positions. So if you're going to hold a few of these guys, I would target dual position or uncertainty with Plath. Otherwise, I'd probably move on from these guys and targeting this top section up here. And then these guys are more in that hold category. But that top three in particular, Watson, Haas, Yeo, I want all three. And if you want all three as well, then join the club. Let me know. Otherwise, let me know who you are buying this week in the middle forward spot. I'll see you guys in the next video. Hopefully that was useful. Let me know if it was, because I love making them. So I'll see you guys. Peace out.